Advance. Miracle. Magical. Sonical. Sonic is a superstar. Sonic Advance.
The Japanese had some weird commercials. Anyway, good evening folks. Hope you all had a good work week and it's time to head back into the world of Sonic the Hedgehog. MLG Panda unfortunately couldn't join me tonight. She's feeling a little under the weather, so I'm just going to go ahead and cross this batch of games off the list myself. So, after Sega pulled out of hardware following the demise of the Dreamcast, they started making games for Nintendo consoles, of course starting with Sonic Adventure 2, but one of their main concerns, or targets in this case, was to get a Sonic game out on the new Game Boy Advance, and that just made logical business sense at the time. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Game Boy Advance was probably the only time a console was brought to market without any form of competition. If you think about it, like Sega wasn't putting out a handheld anymore, obviously. Sony hadn't put out the PSP yet. That wouldn't come until many years later, and Xbox was still too young to even be attempting that. So Sega really wanted to get some games out on the Game Boy Advance because they knew whatever they put out would make money, and they wanted to maximize the money they would make. So one of the first things they made was a Sonic game, and that game would be Sonic Advance. And from there, Sonic would have a pretty healthy life on the Game Boy Advance. Although some games here are better than others. For the most part, Sonic's time on the Game Boy Advance was pretty well received. There were 6 games released. You had the Advance trilogy, Sonic Advance 1, 2, and 3. There was Sonic Battle, a fighting game. Sonic Pinball Party, which wasn't really a Sonic game, but more on that later. And Sonic Genesis, which is what people refer to the Sonic port of Sonic the Hedgehog to this console. So I have a lot of memories with these games. How I got Sonic Advance was I got a birthday present for my little brother when we got our Game Boy Advance, and I saw Sonic Advance at the store. And I bought that for him, but it was more for myself than anything. But Jared was a big enough fan of the series that he was more than happy to get it. And then from there, I just started getting every Sonic game that came out on the console because it was just the biggest thing in the world at the time. The Game Boy Advance was huge at the time. But we got quite a few games to get through tonight, so let's just go ahead and get started. As to how I'm going to be playing these games, we are going to be using emulator once again. I actually own a copy of all these games with the exception of Sonic Genesis, so I don't feel too bad about bending the rules here. And I am in the process of getting some hardware that will allow me to record games off my GBA in the future. So, yeah, hopefully I won't have to resort to emulators so often in the future. So let's go ahead and get started, do a quick sound check. Of Sonic Genesis. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start, of course, with Sonic Advanced. Pretty sure this was actually the first... Yeah, this was actually the first original Sonic game for a Nintendo console. Oh, I got this on mute. Just playing with the sound channels earlier. So, showing off the graphical prowess of the Game Boy Advance right away. That's a great render of Eggman. And then we get the roll call of all the characters. Sonic looks great. Everyone else does too. What I find interesting about this is that the game actually uses the same art style from the adventure games, if a 2D Sonic game is made today, they're either trying to replicate the Genesis games, or they're doing some kind of weird 2.5D game. So it's nice to see them actually pushing hardware here. The Game Boy Advance era was probably the last time developers did that, you know, before the whole retro revival trend started. So like in Sonic 3, you have the option to play as multiple different characters. So you got Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, each with their own unique abilities. But you also have Amy, making her first playable appearance in the 2D game. Playing as her is actually a little awkward because she can't do the spin dash or spin jump. So you have to make use of her hammer to sort of compensate for that, which is a little tricky. But a lot of the games I'm covering tonight tend to share the same cast, so I'm going to rotate the characters out with each game and play, but we're going to start with Sonic for Sonic Advance. Oops, wrong button. And this is something else I really like about Sonic Advance. After you complete a stage, you can go back and play it anytime you want, which is good because in order to get all the Chaos Emeralds in this game, you have to explore the levels and find specific springs. So that's some good design there. Alright, so the first thing we typically talk about are the controls. And right off the bat, this feels fantastic. Sonic's physics feel really good, the jump is fluid, he's responsive to button inputs. This is pretty good. It's all too often that you play a Sonic game where they get all that wrong, so it's nice that they were able to get that right off the bat. And outrun the screen there, that's always fun. And of course, the graphics here are just phenomenal too. A lot of people assume that the Game Boy Advance was actually a 16-bit console, but it was 32-bit as a matter of fact. And again, this is kind of what I wish 2D games would have continued to look like moving forward. Like, instead of just going out of your way to make it look like an NES or a Super Nintendo game, or in the case of Sonic, a Genesis game, actually make use of the hardware to really push how far the fidelity can go. Like, look at the animation on Sonic, look at the backgrounds, look at all that. I mean, that looks better than a lot of retro throwbacks, I would say. It is a little chunky blown up. That's just kind of the nature of Game Boy Advance games. They don't always look terribly well when you blow it up to a large screen like this. They were intended to be on those little screens. Makes me wish that Sega would do a remaster of these games. You know, update the graphics, smooth everything out, but, you know, none of that blending stuff that Capcom likes to use in the Mega Man games. Just go in there, redraw the sprites. That's all you really gotta do. But yeah, this is just a really solid Sonic game. It just feels like an old Genesis game, like the old Genesis games. I also like how the different acts of a zone tend to vary a good deal. While it is still adhering to a very specific theme, in this case, you know, sort of Green Hill Zone, you actually do see the level change as you go forward. So we start at the beach, then we go into a denser forest here, and the level actually ends with you crossing a suspension bridge. Not sure what point this serves, but whatever. Just have to do that every time I play this game. So now we get our first boss, and now it's time for everyone's favorite game show. What was Eggman thinking? Let's see what stupid contraption he's got to fight Sonic this time. Okay, so we have him in a tank-like vehicle, swinging a hammer around very slowly. Though evidently enough to hit me. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this wasn't thought out too well. I do like how when this happens, yeah, start going all over the place. How many times has Sonic blown Eggman up? That dude's got some serious durability going for him. And so yeah, that's what we're going to call it for Sonic Advance. I would say of all the games I'm playing tonight, Sonic Advance is probably still my favorite of all of them. While all the Advance games are great by all accounts, like Advance 2 and Advance 3, they each have a specific gimmick that hurts the game in some way, but Sonic Advance is just a straightforward Sonic game. Yeah, it's not much different from the Genesis games, and one could probably argue that it takes a step back from Sonic 3. But overall, I'd say they did a really good job with this one. So yeah, Sonic Advance, highly recommended. So let's go ahead and go to the next game, which is going to be Sonic Pinball Party. Now, a lot of you guys might be asking, what is that? Well, Sonic Pinball Party, like, you guys might be assuming it might be a port of Sonic Spinball or something, but it's actually a completely original game. And really, I shouldn't be looking at this game, really, because it's not a real Sonic game when you get down to it, but I'll explain why when we actually get into it. And you keep seeing Sonic Team on the logos here, but most of these games were developed by a company called Dibs. Sonic Team did help, and for whatever reason, they got most of the credit for these games, but yeah, they weren't the ones making these ones. They were focused on the console games and screwing it up. I haven't even commented on the title screens, but... Alright, so... Not a big fan of this menu screen, though. Like, too many colors. It's very clashing. It's an eyesore. So, one thing I need to state about Sonic Pinball Party right off the bat is that this is not really a Sonic game, whereas something like Sonic Spinball is more of a Sonic pinball game. Sonic Pinball Party is more of a pinball game with a Sonic theme to it. While it is true that there is a story mode, all it really boils down to is Eggman somehow trapping Sonic and his friends in the casino, and the only way for him to escape is a pinball tournament or something. It's really silly. But all this really is just a collection of pinball boards. In this case, you have Sonic and one for Nights into Dreams, and there's also Samade Amigo, which you can unlock later. I don't know why they felt the need to call this game Sonic Pinball Party. I think a more fitting name would have been Sega Pinball Party, but they probably put Sonic on there just to increase sales. But this is Sonic Spinoffs, so we're going to do the Sonic Pinball table. In all fairness, this does look pretty good, doesn't it? Control is a little weird, though. Ah, I lost track of the ball there. That's annoying. I think they could make the ball stand out a little bit more so you won't lose track of it so much. Maybe make it glow. And man, I can't imagine playing this game on a Model 1 Game Boy Advance, which didn't have a backlit screen. I remember that being a problem with Sonic Advance as well. Didn't really get to, especially with certain levels where they just got so dark it was hard to see what you were doing. That was a problem with a lot of Game Boy Advance games back in the day. Thank Lifesim when the Game Boy Advance SP came out, which did include a backlight. However, the drawback there is some early Game Boy Advance games don't really look too good on the Game Boy SP with the backlit screen. Wait, is that the end of the game? Guess not. Problem with a lot of early Game Boy Advance games, when they get beefed up to when you use a backlit screen on them, the colors can sometimes be washed out. But the reason for that was they would intentionally choose brighter colors in order to compensate for the lack of a backlit screen. And you can definitely see that with games like Castlevania Harmony of Despair and like Pokemon games, I would say. Yeah, it is so easy to lose track of the ball here. Like, just too much on the board, and with the screen scrolling like that, like, it can just disappear. Also just doesn't have the same personality that Sonic Spinball had, where in that game, rather than it just being Sonic-themed pinball boards, it was Sonic actually serving as the pinball, and then the levels themselves being machines that just had pinball mechanics in them for Sonic to make use of. I feel like it would have been cooler if they had done just a straight sequel to Sonic Spinball, but I have a feeling this was cheaper to do. Not doing very good, am I? To be honest, I'm not the best when it comes to pinball. You'd think I would be pretty good at it, considering how much of that tends to be in a Sonic game. But whenever there's pinball in a Sonic game, I'm trying to get through it as quickly as possible. Those levels tend to be my least favorite in any Sonic game. Like, the whole idea with the Sonic game is you want there to be a nice flow through the levels. And if you're having to stop and just screw around on a pinball table, that tends to ruin that flow, which I'm not a big fan of. Alright, one more ball left. Something else that's weird is also how the controls work here. A button is the right paddle, but the left paddle is actually left on the D-pad. I think what would have made more sense is if the paddles were controlled by the shoulder buttons. It's also something that's different about playing pinball in this manner. On a regular pinball game, the harder you hit the button to operate the paddle, often the more force you can apply to that paddle, and that gives you more control over the ball. But because the controls here are completely digitally, you can only apply so much force to it, so yeah, it's just not a great way to play a pinball game. Ugh. And that's basically Sonic Pinball Party. It's kind of hard for me to be angry at this game because at the end of the day, it is just a harmless pinball game. But again, I just would have preferred something more like Sonic Spinball. But it's not bad, it's not great, it's just kind of there. There's not a whole lot to say about Sonic Pinball Party. Let's go ahead and jump into the next game in the advanced line. That should give us something more fun to play. Sonic Advance. Once again, how come you don't put dibs there? Why does it have to be Sonic Team? I hope they got a pay raise for that. I haven't really talked about it so far, but in regards to the logo design here, the graphic design is just great. Even with Sonic Pinball Party, it was really well done. But at this point, the Sonic logo had basically become a trademark in its own right, so it's kind of hard to screw that up, I would say. Okay, so like in the last game, you have multiple playable characters you can play as, but one thing that annoys me about Sonic Advance is all the characters are not available from the start. How it works is you only have Sonic at the start, and after you defeat certain bosses, other characters will become available. You're freeing them from Dr. Robotnik, but I don't know why they made that choice. If one of the selling points of the game is that you get to play as multiple playable characters, I'm going to play as the other characters. You don't have to hide them behind a wall. And what's even more annoying is that you can only unlock the characters as Sonic. So if you get tired of playing as Sonic, then you decide to play as Cream, then you're not going to unlock any of the characters. So, like, what's the point of that? Speaking of which, this was the first game in the series to introduce Cream the Rabbit, who, honestly, I don't have a lot to say about. I've always described Cream as very harmless. There's not a whole lot to her when you get down to it. But she's got a fun design, and, you know, the fact that she has cheese helping her out is a lot of fun. So we're going to go ahead and play as her for this. I do like this map screen, though. It kind of reminds me of Sonic Adventure 2. Once again, some really good graphics for the time. And they definitely amp up the pace for Sonic Advance 2. This game puts a lot more focus on speed as opposed to the first game. How it works is you go, you collect rings, and then once you have a certain amount and keep going for long enough, the character will actually hit top speed, in which case they leave after images, which is really cool. It's actually sort of a precursor to the boost formula, which, see, there I go. The team at Divs would actually have a big hand in pioneering. So it sort of starts here, and then they innovate on it when they get to Sonic Rush, and they were later applied to 3D games. Divs would actually work on the, what was it? The Wii version of Sonic Unleashed. So, yeah, Divs actually did a lot for the Sonic series moving forward, which really irritates me that the Sonic team took so much credit for their work here. My only problem with how the system is handled here is that it sort of trivializes the level design. Like, you see how a lot of these elements flow together. That's kind of how they flow together in the first level, too, and how they flow through most of the levels as well. The only level in this game that really has a unique feel to it is Music Park. And what I mean by that is, again, I'm always talking about the motion in a Sonic game, and it's important for that to vary from level to level. So think about South Island in Sonic 2. Like, you know how you move through that, but then you get to Chemical Plants, and how you move through that level is completely different. And then it's just constantly changing with each level. You just don't get that in Sonic Advance 2, which is kind of my problem with it. Now, it's not to say the game isn't still fun to play, but I just feel like the level design is a little shallow with this one. I also have to talk about the special stages in this game. My god, Sonic Advance 2 has probably the worst special stage system in any Sonic game. I haven't collected any yet, but there are these special coins that you find in the level, and there are 7 of them. In order to get to the special stage, you need to find all 7 of them, and then make it to the end of the level, and when you do that, you go to the special stage. And looking at how I play the game, does that sound like how the game wants you to play it? So, like, see, there was one of the coins right there. Did I just fall into a bottomless pit? Huh. That was interesting. But yeah, getting to the special stage here is just a complete pain because you have to do it in a way the game clearly doesn't want you to. It's like 2 different design mentalities working against each other, which isn't what you want to be doing. Levels are quite a bit longer here too, which depending on who you are is going to be both a good and bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I like a long level in a Sonic game. I also like Cream's animations, they're really cute. especially with cheese. Speaking of cheese, she was actually Cream. She was supposed to make her first appearance in Sonic Heroes, but they decided to include her in this game to make it easier. And I will show you guys why it's so much easier to play as cheese. So yeah, Cream has a nice ranged attack with cheese, and she just completely trivializes the boss fights here. One thing that is cool about Sonic Advance 2 is that all the boss fights are, well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's cool, it's just a unique quirk of the game. All of them are auto-scrollers like this, which, honestly, I'm not a huge fan of. Like, there are a few levels before this game, Sonic games, that did boss fights like that before, but for every boss fight, it just kind of gets old, especially since as you're moving forward, you kind of have less control over your character, which can be a little frustrating. And that's Sonic Advance 2. Honestly, of all the Advance games, I've always looked at Sonic Advance 2 as my least favorite. While it's still a really fun game just because of how fast the pace is, as I said, it just kind of trivializes the level design, and as a result, a lot of it just ends up being really forgettable. Apart from that, the graphics are great, the music is fantastic, there's some decent characterization in there. Every time you rescue a character, you get a little cutscene, and the one where you save Knuckles is especially funny. But outside of that, Sonic Advance 2, not as good as Advance, but still worth playing, I would say. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next game, which is going to be another spin-off, Sonic Battle. Now, when this game came out, I was in a phase in my life where I was basically buying anything that had Sonic's name on it. Like, I didn't care if it was a good or bad game or not. So I saw Sonic Battle on the back of the Sonic Heroes manual, and I just went out and bought it immediately. And I remember playing Sonic Battle a lot, but I don't necessarily remember enjoying it. And there are a number of reasons for that, and we'll go more in depth with that as we move forward. Once again, why doesn't Dibs get a card? Alright, credit where credit's due. That is an awesome title screen. I especially love the flaming Sonic head there. And this menu screen, man, that's awesome. That music, the animation on that flaming head, like, that is metal, dude. I love it. But, so, Sonic Battle, it is a fighting game, and it does actually have a story mode. However, the story mode in this game is a mess, and the reason for that is quite simple. It's repetitive. All it really boils down to is just meeting characters, fighting them, and just doing that again and again and again for hours on end, and it just gets exhausting. And considering that every character has their own story, like, it just takes forever to finish. There have been several times I've tried to go back and finish Sonic Battle, but I've never been able to get through just Sonic's story to get through to everyone else's. I only ever completed it once, and I will probably never do it again, and I have no interest in doing so. So what we're going to do to showcase it here is just go into battle mode. Oh yeah, let me hook up my emulator to other Game Boy games. This is something else that really irritates me about Sonic Battle. Like, when you think of a fighting game, what is the most fun way to play a fighting game? With friends. So, why is it on a Game Boy then? While it is possible to do, like, multiplayer on a Game Boy Advance, it's a lot harder to do than it is on a console because you need extra hardware. In this case, multiple Game Boy Advances and link cables. And that's just not good for this game in particular, because who the hell is going to play Sonic Battle with me? Like, I'm the only one I ever met who had this game growing up. so I have no choice but to play it alone. I also really love the art design in this game too. It's supposed to resemble like gritty graffiti, which I think is a good choice for a fighting game. You do have a good roster. You got Sonic, you got Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, making his only 2D appearance, I think. Same goes for Rouge, and also Amy, Cream, and a new character, Emerald, who is sort of a custom character. You get new abilities you can equip him with as the game goes on. There are also 2 other characters you can play as too. Chaos and Gamma are in the game, but you have to unlock them in the story mode, which I just had no desire to do. But just for shits and giggles, we're going to play as Amy. And I'm going to equip Shadow. I'm going to put Knuckles in there too, just for the lulz. And I'm also going to put Rouge in there because during Sonic's story, she makes a few passes at him, so I'm sure Amy wants to kick her butt right now. Okay, so how the fight system in Sonic Battle works is you have basic attacks, melee attacks, but then you have special attacks. And you can only equip 2 of them at a time. So you have a shot attack, which is a range attack, a power move, which is just a character's special ability, and then a set move, which is some kind of explosive trap. So you can set one for the ground and one in the air too, and you activate that by pushing the R button. And talk about some impressive graphics for the time too. I mean, look at this. These are 3D levels. The character sprites look pretty good too. I mean, this is great. Really impressive for the Game Boy Advance. The character sprites are fantastic as well. Some really good animation as well. I especially love how Amy has the boxing gloves. That's a lot of fun. Ah. Let's try that again. I feel like there actually could be a good deal of depth that you could get out of this. But as I said, you're more likely to be playing this game by yourself rather than with friends, so... Not exactly what I would say is the best way to play this game. I would say that this is better than Sonic the Fighters, but the story mode is really what kills it. And again, the fact that it's so hard to play this in multiplayer. Ooh. Sound effects are really good. Nice and impactful, which is important for a game like this. Wait, did someone already win?
Didn't even break a sweat.
Screw you, Shadow. But yeah, that does it for Sonic Battle. Like, again, that's basically the game itself. The fighting system itself isn't bad. I can actually see that being a lot of fun. Having to pick and choose your different attacks to try and counter whatever your opponent's trying to do. But again, I doubt there are many people who actually did that because, like, a lot of people didn't have this game. A lot of people didn't have link cable, so, like, what are you gonna do about this? This is the kind of game that I really wish that they would re-release on Nintendo Switch Online. But considering that this got such a lukewarm response from fans, and the fact that despite there being a Sega Genesis component of Switch Online, Nintendo doesn't really add to that, so I guess Sega doesn't want to do business with them a whole lot. But the main thing that sucks about Sonic Battle is the story mode. It is just so repetitive and just drags on forever. Not a bad game, I would say. Not a great game. It's just painfully average. There are better games you can play than this. Alright, so let's move on to the last game of the Sonic Advance trilogy. Once again, no divs. Why does divs not get their due? Doing the roll call again for the intro, that's good. And the intro is probably bringing Sonic X to mind too. The story of this game is actually really interesting. Eggman's gotten a hold of the Chaos Emeralds, and he's attempting to do Chaos Control, but something goes wrong and it actually splits the Earth into pieces. Man, that's a really stupid plot. I really hope they don't revisit that for a future Sonic game. I always thought this was a really cute title menu screen, like the way the Chow watches where it goes. Alright, so one of the big components of, well, once again, they lock off a lot of the characters you can play as, but the big gimmick of Sonic Advance 3 is the partner system. So you actually get to pick and choose which characters you want to play as. And rather than like the character just following behind and doing nothing, the different combinations will actually yield different effects. So like when Knuckles goes to glide, he actually does something up a double jump before he goes into his regular glide. And if you were to play as Tails with Knuckles, instead of his standard flights, he would do his glide thing with boxing gloves on, which would serve as something of an attack. I like how Knuckles does the push-ups there. That's a lot of fun. You also have tag actions, which also have different effects depending on the character you play as. So in the case of Tails here, he'll give the character a boost. And it also allows you to make use of the character's special ability, in this case, Tails' ability to glide. So there are a lot of different combinations you can get out of it. I think there are 5 playable characters, so I think that means 25 different combinations, which is really cool. That's a good feature, but one feature I'm not terribly fond of is what you see here. Why are there hub worlds in a 2D Sonic game? Why not just have it go level to level like it's supposed to? That was really dumb. The speed has been slowed down compared to Sonic Advance 2. It's a bit more closer to Sonic Advance, I would say. Though there are some issues with the level design here too. It can be a little hard to find your way forward at times. Also, you gotta watch out for stuff like this because this game loves its in death traps. Especially gotta watch out in spots like this. Ooh, that could have been bad. And right here. You really gotta feel your way through these levels, but not in a good way like in Sonic Advance 3. It's the Sonic 3. Sonic Adventure, Sonic Advance. I get my words mixed up. I've noticed that when I do these streams, and I do rewatch my streams just to see how I do, I've noticed that I tend to slur my words a lot. And it's not that because I'm drinking beer, I actually don't do that anymore. It has more to do with the fact that I'm just not very good at speaking, which may actually be a benefit of me doing these streams. It might help me out in the future. But yeah, so far this actually isn't too bad. Though some may argue that the slower pace is a step down from Sonic Advance, I actually do prefer it here. And yeah, there are some annoyances with the level design and enemy placement, but it's not as bad as other games I've played. Wait, what am I doing? And where did that thing come from? That was just a trap right there. Ugh. I keep forgetting that I can just abuse Knuckles' ability there. I'm so used to playing as Sonic. Okay, I guess I can't go that way. Are you little? Yeah, I'm not saying anything, but I'm just gonna run out of things to say about this game. I think I've already covered, like, the meat and potatoes of what makes it different from the other advanced games. And there's a component to exploration with this game as well. In order to get to the special stages in this game, you have to find all the Chow that are lost in the levels. And that might sound bad, especially considering how much I complain about it in Sonic Advance 2. But it's actually better here for two reasons. Well, one reason in particular. You don't have to get all the Chow in one go. There is a special stage spring in these hub worlds, and in order to unlock it, you have to find all the Chow in all the levels. So it's not too hard to get to the special stage here. But again, why not just have it be get 50 rings and then make it to the end of the stage like in every other Sonic game? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know? It's a good thing Knuckles can still swim. Whoop. Nah. Ah! I should have saw that coming. Okay, let's try this again. Ah, that was slick. Okay, why do there have to be spikes there? Ah! Why are there spikes there? Okay, are these signposts actively lying to me? See, there's one of the Chow you're supposed to rescue. What's up with Knuckles' eyes there? Ah! Wait, did I just walk through that wall? Man, the level design in this game is fickle. Why did there have to be an enemy there? There's no way I would have dodged that on my first time. Yeah, so you realize how easy it is to abuse a lot of Knuckles' moveset. That didn't hit me. Man, these levels just go on forever. No! Okay, that would have been cruel if I got an invincibility and then immediately got crushed, which invincibility doesn't protect you from. Is there anything above this one? No. Trying to see if I can get to where I want to be. Look at Knuckles there, he's like a superhero. Aw, man. Seriously, what is up with Knuckles' eyes there? Where is the end of the level? Alright. Let's see if I can at least get to the end. Ah, not this time. Ah, this is gonna be tricky. Ugh. A lot easier to get through there if you have Knuckles. Nah, I thought I could hit it. Man, I just love the graphics in these games. They don't make them like this anymore. I mean, they don't try to make them like this anymore, at least most people don't. So anyway, Sonic Advance 3. I'm always on the fence with this one. Sometimes I like Sonic Advance 3 more than I like Sonic Advance 1. But every time I play Sonic Advance 3, there's always something about it that annoys me. Whether it be just a frustrating hazard in the level design, poor enemy placement, or just needless hub worlds, which, by the way, is going to become a recurring complaint with me with Sonic games moving forward. It's just hard to say. I would say that Sonic Advance 3 is better than Sonic Advance 2, but I would still recommend the first Sonic Advance over this one. But again, none of the Advance games are bad. The graphics are fantastic, music is great, and while certain games are better than others, I would still say all of them are of a high quality. They are still some of the better 2D games in the series. Let's go ahead and conclude tonight's stream with one last game, and that is going to be Sonic Genesis. Now, all this really is a port of the original Sonic the Hedgehog to the Game Boy Advance. Now, this should be a home run, right? I mean, they've already shown that they can very easily make more advanced Sonic games on the console, so porting the original Sonic the Hedgehog to the Game Boy Advance should be a piece of cake, right? I'm saying this like I haven't played this game before, so let's just go ahead. Let's get this over with. I really don't want to look at this one, but might as well. I didn't think that they started doing this until the Nintendo DS. Like, nobody's gonna read the health and safety warning. Nobody does that. What? No steak? Oh, there it is. I think Sonic Team worked on this one. I want to say... What is going on with the music? And why does that seem slower? Oh no. Oh no, what did you people do? Okay, so... Where do I even start with this, dude? Like, for starters, the presentation here is just completely botched. While it might not look that bad, the frame rate chugs. The graphics are darker for some reason. The sound and music is off. And worst of all, there's freaking screen crunch. So what they did here was they didn't retool Sonic the Hedgehog for the Game Boy Advance. They just took the Genesis game and put it on the Game Boy Advance. And because screen resolutions on the thing are different than they would be on the Sega Genesis, they had to crunch the screen like this. So now every time you jump, you lose track of the ground, which means you can't really see where you're landing. Now this isn't a huge issue for me because I played the original Sonic the Hedgehog so many times that I basically know where everything is, but like, good grief. And from a gameplay perspective, like, it also feels off. Like, there's a weird input delay here. Like, when I start moving, like, it seems to take a bit for Sonic to stop when I let off the control stick. Like, did no one playtest this? Like, they released this as part of Sonic's 15th anniversary. Oh, Sonic's 15th anniversary. So this came out in 2006. Ah, no wonder this is just awful. It came out the same year that game. Like, Sega was smoking something that year. But I'm starting to sound like most Sonic fans right now, aren't I? Good grief. What were you thinking, Sega? Like, I'm beyond words right now. Let's just see if I can get to the end of the level. And like, there are certain boss fights that I bet are a complete train wreck now with this screen crunch. Like, imagine the final boss with the moving pistons and everything. You wouldn't have a clear view of which ones are moving, so you'd likely get screwed. Ah, man, this just feels so freaking clunky. I have played the original Sonic the Hedgehog so many times, so I know it like the back of my hand. And there's just so much wrong with this port. It's like, it's honestly kind of amazing. It's like, you had one of the greatest video games of all time and you somehow managed to ruin it. It's so laggy too. I mean, if you can't get a consistent frame rate with a Sonic game, you shouldn't be making a Sonic game, for crying out loud. Alright, one more act and then I can turn this crap off. Oh man, I can't see anything! Oh, I couldn't see that guy. That could have killed me. Arrgh! Sega, what were you thinking? This is not okay. And it's like a mobile port, for crying out loud. And, man, the checkered background is killing me, too. I mean, like, the way that shifts, it's just hard on the eyes. The game was not meant to be played like this. Alright, let's see how Robotnik is. I can't even see the other platform. Okay, he should have started moving right there. Like, my timing is just shot here. Wait, what happened there? Okay, I completed the first level, and I am not even going to bother with Marble Zone. Alright, so, Sonic Genesis. Holy crap, dude. Like, this is a terrible game on all fronts, but to be honest, it's kind of fascinating to play, because like, you just have to wonder, how could you screw up a game this good, this badly? I mean, like, they had to have been actively trying to make this as terrible as possible, because there's no excuse for this game to be like this. Like, if you couldn't just put the ROM on the Game Boy Advance and have it work properly, you needed to put in the effort to make it work. That is what you do when you port something. You don't... Like... I will say this about Sonic Genesis, for the record. This is actually not the worst version of Sonic the Hedgehog. If you want to know what the worst version of Sonic the Hedgehog is, look up the Gamecom version of Sonic Jam. Like, want to talk about bad? That is even worse. But anyway, that's Sonic the Hedgehog on Game Boy Advance, and to be honest, the Sonic had a pretty good run on the console. The real highlights here are, of course, the Advance games. All of those just fantastic side-scrollers on all fronts. Sonic Pinball Party, not a great pinball game, not a great Sonic game, but it is harmless. And Sonic Battle, like, has a lot of interesting ideas. It's just, you know, it should have focused on being a multiplayer game and sort of this weird fighter RPG thing that they had going. But Sonic Genesis, don't even bother. That game is just a complete train wreck. But yeah, that's Sonic on the Game Boy Advance. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please be sure to like and subscribe. I do these videos every Saturday, typically at 8 o'clock, and what I do is I take a game, or in this case, a batch of games, and I play them for about an hour. I do not play games from start to finish because I feel like you are missing something if you aren't playing the game yourself, though. If that's how you choose to consume video game media, I mean no disrespect when I say that. But that's it for tonight, guys. I hope you all have a good work week, and take care.